I've skipped over a lot of things that I kind of have to move back to here. In fact, I'm going to move back quite a ways. The first band that I played with, the Chicago Stompers, we actually had a 5-night-a-week job in Chicago at one point. These were the days when the Musicians Union was all powerful too. And we all were in the union, but we were all in different locals, not the Chicago local. They didn't like that very well. So they got wind of our getting this job. They called the band leader in, and out in the hall, he heard somebody saying, "Okay, Art, we'll see to it that you get this job instead of these guys." And they were talking to Art Hodes. Well, it didn't work out. We still wound up with a job. And it was a summertime thing, actually. So that was nice. But that was kind of the end of that band, because after that, I don't know what happened, except that some of us went to play with Ted Butterman. Trying to think how we wound up. Well, Walbridge knew Ted. Walbridge got around. He knew all these guys, and he had a kind of a jam session at his folks' house, and Ted was there. And we're playing away, and Ted's scowling, and I'm thinking, oh boy, man, I'm just starting to do this, and here this guy who's really good, and he was, hates me. Well, it turns out that Ted didn't hate me, he hated himself. That's pretty much the way he's always operated. But so we actually, and I was going to school, by the way, at this point at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and found that I was driving to Chicago every weekend to play. But down there at Miami, they put this band together and they needed a piano player. So they hired me, and I can't remember how I told them that I could play the piano, but I sort of could. And so here I was playing in this band. It was an okay band. It wasn't anything, well, it was all right. I was not a good piano player, but I learned about the chords and stuff. I learned on the job. And so we managed okay. There was a guy that used to hang out where we played who thought I was marvelous. And I never told him I wasn't. He loved Jelly Roll Morton, and he thought I was Jelly Roll Morton II. Well, there's no way that there was I could possibly play anything like Jelly Roll Morton did. But this guy drove a Model A Ford. And in fact, he had bought, he was a student there too. He had bought out a bunch of Model A parts from some old Ford dealer in Toledo, I think it was. So he had this Model A, and somehow he got in touch with Davy Jones, who had a record label, Empirical, and Davy used to record a lot of those southwestern Ohio guys, Carl Halen, Gin Bottle 7, Gene Mayle, of course, recorded for him. And some of his stuff he sold to Riverside Records. Well, somehow, my friend, the Jelly Roll Morton freak, lined up for me a recording session with this guy. Me on the piano, that was it. I was young enough and foolish enough to think, well, why not? It's not gonna go anywhere anyway. So we took a trip somewhere along Yellow Springs, I think, was where this guy operated from. And he had this nice recording equipment, stereo for a piano. And he recorded me playing. And I thought, okay, well, this is fun. Let's go have a beer. Forget this. Well, it did come out, not on record. It came out as a stereo tape. Because that was kind of the beginnings of the stereo tapes. And it came out on the Livingston stereo tape label. I discovered later on that there was a department store in Chicago that had it for sale. Why, I don't know. But I walked by this department store, and there this tape was in their display window. My name on it was, I forget what the name of the tape was, Through Them Swinging Doors or something like that. And I thought, oh boy, man, I'm going to get famous. I thought, on the other hand, I thought, how embarrassing. Well, they eventually changed that window, and I never did. I never got a copy of the tape myself, which was okay with me. And I've never found anybody that has a copy of it. I've never seen it on eBay. I'm sure what happened was Livingston took them back, erased all the tapes, and used them for something else because it wasn't worth having. It might have been worth having as a curiosity, but that was pretty much my piano playing career. When I started coming back to Chicago on weekends to play, and by that time I'd met Wayne Jones, and he was out of the Army living in Lafayette, West Lafayette, which was on my way between Oxford, Ohio and Chicago. So I would pick Wayne up, and we'd give him a ride up to Chicago. He'd hang around, and that's when we both got started playing with Ted Butterman. And we played a place. Unfortunately, business wasn't great, but the band was pretty decent. But it was one of these things. It was on the second floor of this place, and wouldn't have anybody there. Then we'd hear somebody on the steps. We'd have to jump back on the bandstands and start playing again to get them in there. And that lasted for a while. But that's actually when I got to know Wayne the best, because he and I would travel together. And in fact, he would come out and stay at my folks' house when he came on those trips. Okay, let's see now. Again, I was still with the Salty Dogs, but I think it was right around then they made a record that Purdue was somehow connected with. So it had to be all Purdue guys. So they dumped me out of the band, which was fine, because I was playing with these other groups at that point. And the record, I think, turned out pretty nicely. The clarinet player they got really didn't know anything about the music. So John Cooper, the piano player, wrote out stuff for him to play, wrote out everything for him to play, and he sounds really good because he could read like a hawk. Turns out that he decided to major in clarinet, which you don't do at Purdue. So he left Purdue, and I went back with the Salty Dogs then. And he went on to be the first chair clarinetist with the Milwaukee Symphony. And I didn't.